Order, order. We start with questions. The Secretary of State for Works and Pensions, Helen Morgan.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The time taken to process a new PIP claim has fallen from 26 weeks in August 2021 to 15 weeks at the end of January of this year.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've recently helped a constituent who waited 4 months for an appeal to an initial PIP decision. The paperwork for that decision was incorrect. It referred to a person that wasn't her, and in fact we don't know who that person was. It took 4 months, another 4 months to correct that, and another month to pay her. The process could best be described, I think, in this instance as a shambles, and another constituent has described it as a highly stressful bureaucratic nightmare. I wonder if the Minister could give us some reassurance that his department are working to speed this process up and make it more dignified for those people applying for help.
Secretary of State.
Speaker, I have set out the improvements in the processing times that people have been experiencing, and in fact at 15 weeks now, which was the figure at the end of January, that is now quicker than was the case during the pandemic. I can't comment on the individual circumstances that the Honourable Lady identifies, but I would of course be very happy to look at the matter that she has raised.
Steve Double.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 2.
I thank my honourable friend because I know personally he knows what a fantastic job that his job centres do. This month St Austell are running a sector-based placement with Crown Rail, offering guaranteed interviews to those who complete the training, and also Newquay Job Centre have just worked brilliantly to bring in 20 new employers who are using the job centre regularly to help fill their vacancies.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the Minister for that answer, and I join her in thanking the excellent DWP staff of both Newquay and St Austell job centres. Through their hard work and under the leadership and policies of this government, we've achieved an 80.2% employment rate locally, which is well above the national average. And we also have some great opportunities for the jobs of the future coming through in renewable energy, in lithium extraction and the space sector. So what more is the government doing to ensure that local people in Cornwall can grasp these opportunities?
I thank my honourable friend, who is a formidable champion for his area. As we speak, our partnership team is working with local employers like Naked Solar to design sector-based work programmes and fill potential vacancies. I'm keen to work with him and his neighbours because those areas he named, they are all good for high-wage jobs that his constituents deserve.
The Select Committee, Sir Stephen Timms.
Thank you very much, One change which would help would be to extend access to employment support to economically inactive people in St Austell and Newquay who are not claiming benefits at the moment and don't have access to that support. Will she consider extending it so that they do have as a step towards increasing the prospects of filling the job vacancies that are there at the moment?
Yeah.
So I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. We've actually extended Restart for another couple of years. I think making sure that everybody who walks through our doors of our job centre is met by a work coach, that they have that time to actually look at that bespoke support is actually what we need to do.
So agree.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government is committed to ensuring separated parents support their children, taking robust enforcement action against those who do not. Since December 2022, there has been an increase from 65% to 68% in those paying something towards their maintenance through collection pay.
Agree.
Last year I wrote to the department about a loophole that allows paying parents who earn non-taxable income overseas to avoid making child maintenance payments. For one of my constituents, this loophole has allowed their ex-partner not to pay any maintenance and effectively engage in financial abuse towards them. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss this particular loophole to ensure paying parents are fulfilling their financial obligations to their children?
Well, I'm obviously concerned to hear the case that she sets out. We just started a consultation looking at the possibility of moving from collect and pay to direct pay for all claimants, which would certainly help a greater focus on compliance. But whilst I'm more than happy to arrange a meeting, I'm not sure a meeting with me will be much help because I'm not in charge of child maintenance, but the relevant Minister in the laws, I will ask that we have a meeting with you.
Cheryl Berry.
Thank you. Question number 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
I thank my honourable friend from a different part of Cornwall. She will know that her job centres locally are doing a great job of helping people find and progress in work, like in her area, driving the recruitment of seasonal workers and creating exciting partnerships with employers like Morrison's.
Cheryl Berry.
Mr. Speaker, and with your permission, I'd like to put on record my condolences to the family and many friends of my immediate predecessor, Colin Breed, who sadly passed away last Thursday. Mr. Speaker, under the Conservatives, we have near record level of payrolled employment, and I regularly hear from employers that they can't get the staff they need. In the last month's Library paper, on people claiming unemployment benefits, it said that 1,405 people were doing so in my constituency. What more can the department do to ensure that the unemployed are ready to fit into the vacancies as they arrive by looking at what local businesses lead?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and may I join her, and I'm sure I speak for the whole House, in sending our condolences to the family and friends of her predecessor. Our employment relation teams are working hard with local employers to match customers to the vacancies in your businesses. We're building skills, working with swaps and boot camps. We're supporting people with an increased generous childcare offer for up to £1,000 for one child and £1,700 for two, and helping people with access to travel. And for those on the health journey, from later on this year, we will be rolling out across England, including in areas in the South West, our Work Well programme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On specific days, job centres have been closed due to ongoing industrial action. Can the Minister assure me that anyone who misses an appointment due to this action will not be sanctioned?
So thank you very much indeed. We will always take a reasonable view, and we will always make sure that unavoidable circumstances such as he speaks about will be taken into account when talking to customers.
Morris. Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a near record level of employment, very low levels of unemployment. We are not stopping there, Mr. Speaker, with the Chancellor announcing our back to work plan in the last statement.
The latest ONS figures show that the number of claimants in my constituency fell over the last year. That's obviously good news, but more needs to be done. So would the Secretary of State agree with me that we always need to make work pay, and that we need to create incentives for people to get back into work, and also that local action, like my annual jobs fair, which I held recently in partnership with the DWP, with the Halesowen College and the Halesowen Bid, can make a practical difference on the ground by getting opportunities to people?
Well, can I congratulate my honourable friend on the reduction in the level of claimants in his constituency, which I know is in part at least due to the excellent job fairs that he assists to organise. He's absolutely right, work should pay, which is why I'm very proud that mine is the party that brought in universal credit, making sure that that is exactly the case.
Tim Farrell.
I'd first add to the tributes paid by the Honourable Lady for South East Cornwall to my friend Colin Breed, who served South East Cornwall with great dignity before the Honourable Lady, and I pay tribute and thank her for her paying tribute and giving condolences to Colin's friends and family. In our part of the world, the issue is unemployment less and lack of a workforce more. You think about the Lake District with 20 million visitors every year and a relatively small working age population, 80% of which is already employed in hospitality and tourism. I wonder if the Minister would help us out by saying yes, at least to discussions with the European Commission who've offered a youth mobility visa programme between the UK and Europe, bearing in mind that only one youth mobility visa scheme exists with Europe already, and that's with Andorra, which is quite small.
Well, I think, Mr. Speaker, the scheme to which the right honourable gentleman refers, the government has already said that it is not minded to pursue that. But that is not the same thing as saying we don't take the issue that he refers to extremely seriously, and that is why we have extensive training provisions such as swaps and also the Work Well provision that we're rolling out that my honourable friend has just referred to.
Neil Hanby.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ombudsman's report has been laid before Parliament, and it is under active and considerable consideration at the present time.
Neil Hanby.
A report in today's Scottish Daily Express notes that 7 out of 10 members of the public support financial compensation for women born in the 1950s. If the government will not act on the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman's final report, which recommended compensation, will they now listen to the voice of the people and provide the proper financial redress WASPy women absolutely deserve and are entitled to?
Mr. Speaker, there are a variety of opinions as to what the outcome of the Ombudsman's report should be. There are the Ombudsman's recommendations themselves. There are some people that take a counter view to that. There are some who believe that there should be more by the way of payments that are made. We are looking at potentially very large sums indeed. It is important, therefore, and only fair to all of those on all sides of the argument that we take an appropriate amount of time to make sure that we thoroughly consider the report, which the Ombudsman has also invited Parliament to consider as well.
Father House and Peter Bolton.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for reminding himself and us that the Ombudsman unusually suggests Parliament should get involved. Some were asking for £10,000 per person in compensation. The Ombudsman's recommended between 1,000 and just under 3,000. Could the Secretary of State indicate whether he's going to make a decision, and if so, when and how much?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend, the Father of the House, for his question. I can't prejudge what is a very detailed set of considerations that are being undertaken at the moment, but he did make reference to the amounts involved here, which are very considerable. But as I have said, it is absolutely right that we very carefully look at the conclusions of that report and listen to what Parliament has to say in that respect.
Okay, Mike Ainsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rosalind Gilmore is one of several thousand WASPy women in my constituency. Again, it's 6 weeks now since we had the statement before the House. Again, repeating that call is when can they expect this response to the Ombudsman report?
Yeah. Well, I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer that I've just given to the Father of the House. It has to be stressed, I think quite rightly, Mr. Speaker, that this report was 5 years in the making, and that in part at least was due to the complexities of the matters that are under consideration, and we are looking at those matters extremely carefully.
Michael Lobby.
Mr. Speaker, I think two things cannot be disputed. The first thing is that we do know that some women did come to harm because of what happened, and the second point is that it has been a very long time in the making, this report, and prior to that, all the assessments that came to pass then. Could I encourage the Secretary of State to please look into this matter, not just as carefully as he, I know, will do and is saying he will, but at great pace now, please?
I have made it very clear, Mr. Speaker, at this dispatch box there will be no undue delay when it comes to coming to conclusions on this matter, and I thank the honourable friend for his question.
Peace spokesperson David Linden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In giving evidence to the Select Committee on Wednesday, the Ombudsman essentially said that the reason why they decided to lay the report to Parliament was because they couldn't trust that the government would deal with it. Yep. Can I ask the Secretary of State a simple question? Does the Secretary of State have confidence in the Ombudsman, and does he accept the report?
Well, in terms of opining on the report, Mr. Speaker, I think I have made our position extremely clear, which is that we are considering it, and without undue delay, and we'll come back to the House in due course. The Ombudsman, as the honourable gentleman has indicated, has invited the House to express its opinion as well, and that is something that we'll consider alongside the matters raised within the report.
David Linden.
Mr. Speaker, he's right to say that in due course is something that is on people's lips, because the reality is that 270,000 WASPy women have now died, and with every passing day, indeed even during our Select Committee hearing on Wednesday, 9 women would have died. Isn't the issue here that the government hopes that during the course of an election campaign this issue will get lost, and that the two big parties can concoct a situation whereby we ignore this, more women will die and more 1950s women will be denied the justice that they deserve?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I simply don't accept that that is a fair assessment of the very considerable time and effort that we are putting into taking this matter extremely seriously.
Paula Barker.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No estimate has been made, but customers can request a mandatory reconsideration if they do not agree with their decision to stop their universal credit.
Speaker. My constituent, Georgina Mitchell, is a single mum to 3 children, 2 with additional needs. She works as a nurse and is in receipt of universal credit. And despite the Minister saying work pays, since October, she's had her benefits intermittently stopped because DWP have falsely recorded her earnings as £19,000 one month, £12,000 the next month, and so on and so forth. She can't pay her social landlord, and her ability to pay for childcare is severely impacted. I've raised this with the local officials, and despite assurances, it keeps happening. She cannot sort this. Despite my interventions, I can't seem to sort it. So can the Secretary of State or the Minister investigate this matter as a matter of urgency and advise me why the mistakes keep happening and what will be done going forward to ensure they don't happen again?
I'm actually very concerned to hear the case she raises. I'm more than happy to look into it. If she contacts me further, I recognise the urgency with which we would need to do that.
Christian Wakeford.
Question 8, Mr Speaker.
Thank you again. Poverty among pensioners has remained stable, with no statistically significant changes since 2022-23. The number of pensioners in relative low income has decreased by 1% to 16% in 2023. And since 2010, over 200,000 pensioners have been lifted out of poverty.
Christian Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My inbox is full of constituents who are sick of the economic chaos inflicted by this government and by the former Prime Minister. Minister, can you explain why the number of elderly individuals resorting to food banks has doubled in the past year to nearly 100,000? Are the people of Bury South wrong? And if they are, what is the reason so many of the elderly residents can't afford to eat in this country?
In 2023, 1% of low-income pensioners lived in a household that had access to food bank within 12 months. This percentage is unchanged from the previous year's figures. I recognise the effort that people put into supplying their front bench and their back benches with zinger points to make, but I always learned when I was in that role 25 years ago to make sure I worked out what the government's answer might actually be.
We now come to the temporary Shadow Minister, but can I wish the Shadow Secretary of State speedy recovery and looking forward to seeing them in the House. And to Riedel, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I'm sure that the Shadow Secretary of State is making a good recovery and is probably watching us even now in between her physiotherapy. But isn't it the case that on this government's watch, food bank usage has doubled for pensioners, and over 2 million, that's nearly 1 in 5 pensioners now living in poverty? And this figure is still rising. It's not stable, it's rising. So what is the Minister going to do about it?
I, of course, pass on my good wishes also to the Shadow Secretary of State, who I hope is recovering well. And just as I gave some advice, let me give some advice now to the front bench. Always listen to the answer the Minister has just given, and I can at least repeat it. In 2023, 1% of low-income pensioners lived in a household with access to food bank within 12 months. This percentage is unchanged from last year's figure.
Angela Riedel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, but 2 million are in poverty. And in fact, far more, we got far more pensioners out of poverty than his government has, and the number of pensioners in poverty is now rising. It was 1.6 million when they came into office. It's now 2.1 million, so there are more pensioners in poverty, and despite the Minister's bluster, the government's own statistics show that well over a third of pensioners entitled to pension credit aren't receiving it, which saves his department almost $3 billion a year. And even when they do apply, his department is missing its own 10-week service standard for processing new claims in nearly a quarter of all cases. So why is his department so reluctant to ensure that pensioners are receiving the benefits they're entitled to?
Well, I think we're making an enormous amount of effort into improving the uptake of pension credit. The number of claims received in the financial year 2022-23 was more than 80% higher than over the same period the year before. The recent caseload is going up for the first time in over a decade. We've given pensioners on pension credit cost of living payments. We've given pensioners extra money on top of their winter fuel allowance and cold weather payments. The reality is no government has supported the pensioner population more than this government. And we all know Labour are the party of 75% pension increases. No pensioner will ever forget that.
Neil Coyle.
Number 9, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, access to work remains in high demand. We have increased the number of staff processing access to work claims and are prioritising both renewal applications and those from customers about to start a job. We're also improving the service through increased digitalisation to reduce the time from application to decision.
On this, there is a litany of broken promises to disabled people. Ministers have failed to tackle the backlog, failed to open the scheme to more employers, failed to extend the scheme to apprenticeships, and failed to passport packages of support. So why have ministers now decided to hit disabled people with more brutal cuts to PIP when they haven't supported disabled people to work through access to work?
Mr Speaker, the average timescale for an access to work application decision in April 24 was 43.9 days. We have increased the staff on applications, deploying 95 staff from wider DWP work. And claims, despite the Honourable Gentleman's points, claims for reimbursement are in a good position within a 10-day ambition to pay. What I would say is it does reflect the ambition that employers have, their mindset change to be more open-minded with their recruitment, and I'm delighted about that.
Shadow Minister Vicky Fox.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. OK, let's get some facts. On the 1st of January 2024, there were 24,874 people awaiting an access to work decision. On the 1st of February, 26,924. On the 1st of March, 29,871. And on the 1st of April, 32,445. Every month, the figures keep increasing. So since the beginning of 2024, the access to work backlog has risen by more than 7,500. Does the Minister actually really think this is supporting more disabled people back into work?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her points, and if we're trading figures as the close of business on the 7th of May 2024, there were 36,721 applications awaiting decision. And I would remind for those people listening why this matters, because this is very significant support, demand-led support for people who are getting opportunities to work or take new roles on. And this grant can fund them up to £66,000 worth of flexible, personalised support per person per year. It's absolutely right that we get the right information from the individual and take time to approve a significant application such as this.
Gordon Henderson. Oh, sorry, Vicky Foxcroft.
I'm absolutely shocked that the Minister brags about the access to work backlog increasing to 36,781. Last month, the UN published its latest review of how the UK has implemented its Convention on the Rights of Disabled Persons, the first since 2017. The access to work backlog was just one of the many reasons society cited as evidence that the government is still failing to take all appropriate measures to address grave and systemic violations of disabled people's rights. Now, does the Minister have any plans to put this right by finally implementing the UN's recommendations, or is she going to ignore them as successive Tory governments have consistently ignored disabled people?
Well, I'm disappointed not to be enough of a bragger in this House, but what I am very pleased about is that actually we are taking time to make sure that the tailored support is correct. We're working around fit notes and occupational health. We're also listening to those who are deaf and hard of hearing, who make up 36% of the total access to work expenditure, and I will be bringing more to the House on this matter. We're absolutely focused on improving this with online 24/7 applications for access to work. And in regard to the other point she makes, if she listens to the BBC Access All podcast, I think she'll hear that I say that we're very disappointed on that report. We continue to work very hard for disabled people, and indeed we will be doing all we can to make sure that they're listened to, unlike her not listening to a word I've said just now.
Gordon Henderson.
Question 10, Mr Speaker.
I thank my honourable friend Fantastically, as timing would have it, the team today at Sittingbourne and Shep in your constituency are holding a jobs fair at the Swale Leisure Centre with the support of 48 local employers. Local radio station is broadcasting live from the event to promote opportunities. The DWP is working hard day in, day out to get people into work.
Gordon Henderson.
I thank my honourable friend for that reply. However, would she agree with me that it is also important to ensure that people who are unemployed have the education and skills training needed to take the jobs that are on offer? Much of the unemployment in my own constituency is on the Isle of Sheppey. So with that in mind, would she join me in welcoming the radical shake-up of secondary education now taking place on the island, and in addition, an extension of Sheppey College to provide additional post-16 skilled training courses, which is being part funded by the government's Levelling Up Fund?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I would join him, because any way we can help lift skills across the piece, boot camps, work-based academy programmes, helping people into high-skill, well-paid jobs, particularly in areas where perhaps that hasn't been the norm, is to be welcomed and very much congratulated.
Is it really linked? Jim Shallon?
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all thank the Minister for what she's going to do for Sittingbourne and Sheppey constituency. It's absolutely brilliant. But what I would love to see is the same thing happening across all this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in particular to Strangford. Could I ask the Minister, could she work together with the local colleges who can give opportunity and skills, and it's better to see them working together?
Order. I can say to the Minister, it does say this is only about filling jobs, actually, in Sittingbourne and Sheppey and not the rest of the world. Right, let us move on. Peter Aldis. It was a good effort, but out of 10, 1.
Number 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 12 and 18 together. In terms of reforming welfare, we are increasing the incentives to work. We are increasing the disincentives not to work or not engage or to engage with the system. And we are looking to better target help for those who need it most.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm most grateful to my honourable friend for that my right honourable friend for that answer. I recently discussed the consultation on changes to PIP with Waveney Shims, our local MS support group. They highlighted the need for a more targeted and fair approach for those with fluctuating conditions, which should include the scrapping of the 20-metre and the 50% rules, and the need for assessments to be carried out by those qualified and with a full understanding of neurological conditions. I'd be most grateful if my right honourable friend can confirm that the review will take these issues into consideration.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question and for the considerable interest and knowledge that he has in this area, and for the discussions indeed he has held with me on these matters. We are going through currently, as he will know, a 12-week consultation on how PIP could be reformed going forward, and I certainly subscribe to the view that we do want to examine this issue of one size fits all and whether there are better ways of looking after people going forward.
Mr. Speaker, may I welcome the government's welfare reforms, celebrate the millions of additional people who are now in work thanks to this Conservative government. Note that every Labour government there's ever been, Mr. Speaker, leaves more people on the unemployment and on the dole queue at the end than at the beginning, and theirs is a truly disgraceful record. But ask my right honourable friend if he can give assurance to my constituents who may be chronically ill or vulnerable that though there will be support in place, they won't be forced back into work if that's not appropriate.
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. Work is absolutely essential. It's right at the heart of the reforms that we are bringing through, and indeed the OBR has assessed the impact of our measures with the work capability assessment reforms, for example, as leading to over 400,000 fewer people on those benefits by the end of the forecast period. I am very proud of that achievement because, as he highlights, that will mean that more people have work and the benefits of it.
Marshall Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Secretary of State claims that his work capability assessment reforms are to encourage more people to get into work. Yet the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts that just 3% of the 424,000 people who would be denied financial support will actually move into work in the next 4 years. So the evidence is clear that these reforms are codes for cuts. So will the Secretary of State finally come clean and admit that welfare reforms are about denying vital protections and support for people with serious mental and physical health conditions?
Reforms we're bringing in, Mr. Speaker, are not code for cuts. They are a clear, well thought through set of reforms for putting work right at the centre of people's existence. The Honourable Lady quoted the OBR. She'll also be aware that over the last 3 fiscal events, the OBR believes that the measures that the Chancellor has brought in overall will mean 300,000 more people in the labour market.
Anna Bardell.
Speaker, when he's considering welfare reforms, will he please look at the shambles in the child maintenance service? Because over the last year, the number of complaints to my constituency office has skyrocketed. Chief amongst those, the fact that constituents can't get responses, and when they do, those responses differ between different members of staff and often are in conflict with each other. So can I ask what he's going to do to address the extraordinary waiting times and the other communication issues within the child maintenance service?
Mr. Speaker, we are looking at modernising the way in which the child maintenance agency operates, as she will know. If she has specific examples of constituents that have had undue waiting times, then I'd be very interested in putting her in touch with the relevant minister who serves, as the House will know, in the other place, for him to consider those.
Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to run programmes to support autistic people into employment, including local supported employment, disability confident and access to work. DWP will also be working with stakeholders to support the independent task group carrying forward the recommendations following the Buckland Review of Autism Employment.
Peter Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I draw my honourable friend's attention to the efforts by Darlington Building Society, along with other companies in our region, supporting the North East Autism Society to help to create 1,000 jobs for people with autism? And can my honourable friend highlight the work being done by the fantastic team at Darlington Job Centre with their health and welfare roadshow this Wednesday to help people get back into work?
Minister.
Thank my honourable friend for bringing forward these important initiatives to the House of what's going on in his patch in Darlington. Local programmes like these have a huge impact in helping autistic people into work and tackling stigma. Once established, I'm sure the Buckland Review Task Group will be interested in hearing direct details of the work that's being done in his area.
Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister is right that the Buckland inquiry and report is a breath of fresh air, and I contributed as chair of the Autism Commission to that inquiry. But isn't it the fact that too often people on the autism spectrum or any spectrum are undervalued in terms of their huge potential to do great things in our economy in many, many jobs? Could he look at that early diagnosis, which is so important?
Yes, the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend, the Minister for Employment, linking together on this as we have specialist swaps for those people on the autism spectrum to really see that talent and the ability. Autistica estimates 1 in 70 people are autistic. That's around 1 million across the UK. Yet sadly, 3 in 10 of working age autistic disabled people are in employment, and this government, with the review, is determined to tackle that.
Tracy.
Question 14, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer questions 14 and 19 together. We are bearing down on unemployment, not least through the sterling work of our JCP work coaches and also through the Back to Work plan that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, recently announced.
Tracy.
This Friday, I'm going to be hosting my next jobs fair in Atherstone, along with the local DWP. And whilst these events have been very successful, with over 30 businesses typically on hand with live jobs on offer, One of the regular bits of feedback that I do get is that access to transport is often a barrier to people taking up jobs, particularly where the jobs might be out of the town centre or in industrial parks, or before that first pay packet comes in. So could the Secretary set out what, if any support is available to help as many people get into some of these fantastic opportunities that we do have in North Warwickshire and Bedworth?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for the extraordinary work that he does locally to support people into work. He asked what support there is for those who have travel challenges. There is the Flexible Support Fund, which is there for a variety of different uses, but one of them is for the first 3 months of employment to help with exactly the issue that he has raised.
Jeremy Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we've successfully halved inflation, but we've got to get people back into work. In my Bridgend constituency, we've lost the Ford factory, we've lost Biomet. It's about these local jobs. I think, and I've always said, Mr. Speaker, maintaining close contact with local employers and working with businesses on the ground is the way to do it. Can the Minister tell the House what his department's doing to work with employers to get people back into work?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we do a huge amount with employers, both at the national level but also at the local job centre level. And if he hasn't already engaged with the local job centre with those particular staff, I would strongly recommend that he does so. The results, I think, Mr. Speaker, speak for themselves. Unemployment is around half the level that it was in 2010 under the last Labour government. We've got near record levels of employment. Youth unemployment under this government has fallen by over 40%. Under Labour, Mr. Speaker, it went up by almost 45%.
Sarah Dye.
Speaker, more than 39,000 South West companies are being classed as insignificant economic distress, according to Begbie Trainer's Red Flag Alert report. The loss of these businesses would deepen regional economic inequality and increase regional unemployment. So what steps is the Minister taking with Cabinet colleagues to ensure these businesses providing vital jobs find a way out of significant economic distress?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as we've set out in these questions, there is a back-to-work plan. It is very clear, it is very detailed, and it is working for the reasons that I have given. If she has examples of specific employers who are under the distress that she outlines, then I know that the Minister for Employment would be very happy for her to reach out to the Minister to look at specifically what we may be able to do as a department within her constituency.
Shadow Minister Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said this morning, and the Secretary of State repeated it just now, that the government had introduced universal credit to help people into work. But that is not a real account of the situation, because the truth is, not only do we have record levels of sickness-related inactivity, but young people are faring the worst. Now, I know what ministers will say, and we've already had the questionable allegation trotted out that Labour governments, they say, leave office with unemployment higher. But actually, Mr. Speaker, full facts found that that's true of Conservative governments post-war particularly. So will the Minister acknowledge what is going on today, that for the first time ever we have 3 million 16 to 24-year-olds inactive? That's true, isn't it?
Well, I've already set out, Mr. Speaker, we've got universal credit, as the Honourable Right Honourable Lady has identified. We also have Workwell, we have universal support to address exactly the individuals to whom she refers. I think on the general point of economic inactivity, it should be pointed out that it's below the OECD, G7 and European Union average. It's lower than in France, Italy and the United States. And of course, Mr. Speaker, it's lower than every year under the last Labour government.
McGovern.
I said they would, and I hear what the Minister says about scheme after scheme, about initiative after initiative. But what have the results been? Because if the Tory plan was working, the OBR would have forecast an increasing employment rate, wouldn't they? But what's the truth? Unemployment is not only forecast, is not only forecast to go down, but the forecast was downgraded in response to their policies. That's the truth, isn't it?
Well, our record speaks for itself, Mr. Speaker. 4 million more people in work since 2010. Unemployment has halved since the last Labour government. That was on her watch. Youth unemployment's fallen by over 40%. Under her watch, it rose by over 40%. And the record on economic inactivity, as I've already stated, is that under the last Labour government, it was higher in every single year than it is today.
Alexander Stafford.
Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The State Pension is foundational support for older people. In the next year, we will spend over £167 billion on benefits for pensioners, some 6% of GDP.
Mr. Speaker, older people should be able to retire in comfort and dignity, which is why this government created the triple lock, why we increased the state pension by 8.5% this year and 10.1% last year. However, many of my constituents in Rother Valley are now concerned about being taxed on those pensions, as the personal allowance has been effectively frozen for nearly 5 years. Will the Minister and the Secretary of State encourage the Chancellor to look again at the personal allowance and allow more pensioners to keep more of their well-deserved money?
Well, as I am sure he is aware, this is a government that has doubled the personal allowance since 2010, and it's absolutely clear that for those relying solely on the state pension, they are not liable for income tax.
Steve McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we must all be aware of a growing number of pensioners who are struggling with rent, council tax and other cost of living increases. Given that state of affairs, does the Minister think there may be an argument that the access to pension credit threshold is too high at the present time, and if he were to lower it just a little, he would help a great many more people who are obviously struggling?
Well, I would just draw to his attention the fact that the state pension itself has gone up by 8.5% this year after 10.1% last year. We've added on top of that for those in receipt of pension credits from £900 in cost of living payments. 8.9 million have received over £300 top-up on their winter fuel payment. We have spent billions upon supporting pensioners through the cost of living crisis. As we established in the exchanges earlier, pensioner poverty remains stable.
Richard Begg.
Question number 16, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I shall group this with question 17. The government has provided total support of over £108 billion to help households and individuals with higher bills. As I just said, in addition, the basic state pension has gone up by 8.5% this year.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But a new poll today shows 2/3 of people think the government should urgently pay fair compensation to all those WASPI women, including many in East Leeds, hit by the change to the state pension age. It's been over 6 weeks since the Secretary of State got the Parliamentary Ombudsman's final report, but nearly 3 years since the Ombudsman said the DWP had committed maladministration through their failure to properly inform affected women of the state pension age changes. So with a WASPI woman dying every 13 minutes, time's not on their side. When will the government stop dragging its feet? And to help ensure justice, will the government allow MPs to vote on a compensation package before the summer?
Well, the honourable gentleman has heard the Secretary of State at great length reply to a number of these questions already today. As he said, we're looking carefully at this report, considering what is a very complex set of recommendations and proposals to make sure that we do the right thing.
Ministers certainly seem to prefer the comfort of their own massaged figures to facts, Mr. Speaker. The Trussell Trust, however, say they've seen a 36% rise in pensioners turning to food banks in the last 6 months, and it's likely to increase. The hard fact is the UK devotes a smaller percentage of GDP to state pensions and pensioner benefits than most other advanced economies. When will they take pensioner poverty seriously and fix this scandal?
Well, the households below average income statistics, which are cleared by the Office for National Statistics, show that 1% of low-income pensioners lived in a household that has access to food bank within 12 months. Given all the effort that we are putting into increasing access to pension credit, the success that campaign is having, the ongoing campaign that's having, I'm very confident that we will make continued progress in reducing pensioner poverty.
We now come to topicals. Chris Clarkson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Topical question number 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And could I firstly extend my best wishes to my opposite number to the Shadow Secretary of State and wish her a speedy recovery. Since my last appearance at the dispatch box, Mr. Speaker, we have announced the areas for the Workwell pilot that will cover about a third of England. I'm extremely pleased that we have also now gone out for consultation, a call for evidence on fit note reform, and that will feature within those pilots, the 15 pilots that I have just referred to. We also, on the 8th of May, Mr. Speaker, announced that access to work has gone digital. And finally, Mr. Speaker, could I congratulate my honourable friend, the Minister for Disabled People, on her elevation to Minister of State, which both reflects the seriousness with which we take her portfolio and, of course, her undoubted abilities and contribution to my department.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I join the Secretary of State in congratulating the Minister in her elevation? It's not before time. This Conservative government has an enviable record when it comes to employment, with 4 million more people in work since 2010. It's one of the reasons I was so pleased to hear that one of the ICBs involved in the Workwell scheme that my right honourable friends just mentioned will be Greater Manchester, meaning that my constituents in Hayward and Middleton will be able to access integrated health and employment support from October this year. The Honourable Lady Hettles from a sedentary position, the only job she's created recently is for a couple of clowns. So, well, that is topical, to be fair, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask my right honourable friend to outline how this scheme will benefit people in my constituency and across Greater Manchester in ensuring that they can access work?
Honourable friend for his question. He's right. In Greater Manchester, in parts of London, in Cambridgeshire, right the way across to the Isles of Scilly and parts of Cornwall, this is being rolled out. It brings together both healthcare support and work coach support to make sure that we do absolutely everything we possibly can to help those that face those barriers to work into work.
Mr. Speaker, it's an unavoidable fact that the UK has one of the lowest pensions in the developed world, and pensioner poverty is a very real issue. I meet with constituents of mine who are pensioners reasonably frequently, and all of the increases that the government has provided them have been lost through taxation. So, for example, Peter's private pension is going to be cut by £681 per year. Mr and Mrs Clark's modest private pension has been slashed by almost 50%. They did the right thing and put in a little bit extra away for the retirement. Will the government do the right thing and correct it so they can enjoy it?
Can I just say to everybody, please, I've got a lot of people to get in on topicals. They're meant to be short and punchy. I really do need to get all the members in. Minister.
And I would just simply point to what the Resolution Foundation has to say in their Living Standards Outlook. Pensioner poverty is forecast to fall.
Sir Desmond Swain.
That it wouldn't survive under Labour. Just how vital is the work plan?
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this, because in the absence of this government, Mr. Speaker, the work plan will be no more. The problem is we don't know exactly what will replace it, because there is no plan from the party opposite, no plan on WCA, no plan on PIP, no plan on fit notes. We do not know what Labour stands for. So let's stick with a plan and let's elect a Conservative government at the next election.
Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent Joseph Rowntree report shockingly revealed 1 million children experienced destitution in the UK last year. Isn't it the case that the government has completely failed the most vulnerable children in our society?
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, not at all. We're providing significant support through the welfare system and expect to spend around £306 billion in this financial year, including £138 billion on children and those of working age, with absolute focus and target on cost of living support to those most vulnerable families, and also setting out things like the local housing allowance, which helped 1.6 million families in that bracket.
Right. Sir David.
I should like to begin by praising my own Bexley Heath Job Centre for the tremendous work that they're doing to get people into employment. And I visited them on Friday and was very impressed. Our welfare system, Secretary of State, should always be there to protect the most vulnerable in our society. But new challenges are threatening its sustainability and prevent it from working as it was intended. Can I therefore welcome my Right Honourable Friend's plans to better target the system towards those who need it most, while controlling spiralling costs and ensuring it's fair to the taxpayer.
Well, my right honourable friend is, as always, absolutely right. We have to have a system that is targeted to the most vulnerable in our society. It also has to be fair to the taxpayer because, Mr. Speaker, that is what underpins partly the confidence that the public have in our welfare state, and that is worth preserving.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 270,000 WASPy women have already passed away in the time the Ombudsman's report has been ongoing. How many more 1950s-born women in Lancashire will die before the government finally acts on the report's recommendations?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already replied to some questions in this session on that matter, and just to reiterate, we are looking extremely carefully at what is a very complex report that took the Ombudsman 5 years or thereabouts to compile, and there will be no undue delay in us responding to that.
Frank Brereton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend the Secretary of State's efforts to make work pay, but for many of those in work, a lot of the excellent support available in job centres is currently voluntary. So will my right honourable friend look at what more he can do to encourage those in Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire to take on more of the upskill, to take on more well-paid work and to reduce dependency on benefits?
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. So, and I'm sure your family will be wishing you a happy birthday from back there in Stoke and the small children. So, could I just say, as I've outlined, there is some great work going on. I met with the Skills Minister only last week to discuss some of this better join-up. Allowing people to progress in work is something that we're really focused on, allowing them to move up, move on. To stay and succeed in work is just as important as getting that first job.
Blackford.
September, the 14th of September 2023, this House had a backbench debate which was led by myself and supported by the member for Murray and the member for Easington, asking the government to take action on footballers with brain-related injuries. The minister that responded spoke warmly, and the then minister, the member for Corby, indicated there would be a meeting for the three of us on a cross-party basis with the Industrial Injuries Advisory Council. I've written to the Minister on the 18th of January, on the 13th of March. There was a Westminster Hall debate on the 24th of April, but nothing as yet has happened. Can we get that meeting with the Industrial Injuries Advisory Council, and let's make sure that we get the support to those footballers with brain injuries that need it?
Mr. Speaker, I've already met with the Chair of the Industrial Injuries Advisory Council in my role as Minister for Disabled People, and I'll continue to engage wherever and whatever is required. To be clear, they are considering any connection between the neurodegenerative diseases and professional sports people, and will publish findings once the investigation is complete. I've also met with the Sports Minister and will be keen to share this with colleagues, and I will come back to him.
Well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Conservative government's next generation of welfare reforms are to be warmly welcomed. The NHS North West London ICB, which covers Uxbridge and South Ruislip, has been selected as a lead partner for one of the new Workwell pilot areas. Will my right honourable friend meet with me to discuss how we can maximise the programme's effectiveness in integrating health advice for my constituents?
Well, I welcome my honourable friend's interest in Workwell, which is a significant intervention. I'm not sure if the Secretary of State's diary or mine as yet, but we are keen to meet and highlight the work of the NHS North West London. It's one of the 15 partnerships, Mr. Speaker, backed by £64 million worth of investment. It will design and deliver integrated Workwell services to around 59,000 disabled people to start, stay and succeed in work.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. New statistics show that there are 4.3 million children living in relative poverty, with, as we've heard, 1 million children experiencing destitution in the UK, including in Manchester, which has the second highest levels of destitution in the country. What impact does the Minister think their government crashing the economy and unleashing the cost of living crisis has had on those figures?
As the question I referred to earlier, I laid out that, but our economy is going gangbusters. Inflation is down to 3.2%, but I would gently point him to the additional support in the Household Support Fund that we've extended for another 6 months, and I might gently ask him to press the Mayor as to where the £32.3 million has gone for his area then.
Welcome the government's reforms to welfare and put on record my thanks to the great team at the Fareham Job Centre with whom I've worked to organise some jobs and apprenticeship skills fairs. A child growing up in poverty, though, Mr Speaker, is more likely to have worse literacy, numeracy, health and job outcomes and a shorter life expectancy than the national average. Mr Speaker, isn't it right that the single biggest, most effective thing the government could do now is to scrap the two-child benefit cap?
So I thank you, Mr Speaker. I would gently say to the right honourable lady that I'm sure she'd agree that any system has to be balanced and fair for both the taxpayer but also for those who need it most at the point of need. That sense of fairness, many working families who don't see their incomes rise when they have to make these choices, we have to make a system fair. I'd be more than happy to sit down with her and explain how we do that.
Andrew Gwynn.
Maternity allowance, contribution-based JSA, contribution-based employment and support allowance, bereavement benefits, basic state pension, new state pension. These are all calculated using your contributions to national insurance. Given the Chancellor's announcement of his desire to abolish national insurance, costing £46 billion, what discussions has the Secretary of State's Department had with the Treasury about how he's going to fund it?
Mr Speaker, this scaremongering about the state pension and the £46 billion on the back of what is an aspiration through time, maybe more than one Parliament, to abolish national insurance is frankly disgraceful, particularly from a party that gave us a 75p increase in 1999 and on their watch saw us have the 4th highest rate of pensioner poverty in Europe.
Catherine Fletcher.
Thanks to scientific research, there is an emerging picture of the biological causes of common mental health conditions moving forward. Now, given his extremely welcome Work Well announcement, questions have been raised about how individuals implementing that can not only understand the diagnostic pathways that they need to go through, but also improving the evidence base for treatment, specifically solid science to support this government policy delivery. So will the Secretary of State work with his colleagues in the Department of Health and also in the Department of Science and Technology to help academic research provide the evidence that we need to deliver positive outcomes for people with mental health conditions?
Mr Speaker, can I thank the Honourable Lady for her very pertinent question, and that is exactly why we are piloting these measures. We want to make sure that we get it right. I'm very interested in the suggestions that she has just made, and I would be very happy to consider those in greater detail.
Mr Speaker, the government have been talking a lot about sick note culture. As this is Mental Health Awareness Week, does the Minister not agree that the record long waits that many people face in getting adequate mental health care is delaying their return to work and keeping them on benefits longer?
Yep. Well, Mr. Speaker, the approach that we're taking with our call for evidence is to try and find a system in which the fit note approach is improved. And part of that must be getting treatment to people earlier rather than later. And that's exactly why my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, came forward with 400,000 additional talking therapies within the NHS for exactly that purpose.
Simon Fell.
Mr Speaker, may I put on the record my thanks to Barrow Job Centre and also the Central DWP team for the work they've been doing to support the community through the Team Barrow project. I was also delighted to find out that we are going to be a Work Well pilot area in South Cumbria. So I wonder whether my right honourable friend might be able to outline what a difference that will make to local SMEs and people looking to get into the jobs market.
Mr Speaker, what it will do is intervene at a very early stage of the health journey for those falling out of work and going along that journey into long-term sickness and disability benefits. We want to stop that journey by helping people bring together through Work Well healthcare assistance and job coach, work coach assistance to make sure that we retain people in work, or if they're not far from the labour market, bringing them into employment.
Dougal.
Mr Speaker, since we began this question session a little over an hour ago, 4 WASPI women have died while we debated the challenges of WASPI pensions. The Secretary of State talks about the great sums involved. Can I remind him, those sums involved belong to the women affected, and this government showed no lack of haste in penalising those women. Will he show the same eagerness to compensate them?
Important, Mr Speaker, that all government policies are properly costed, and the costs of those both to the taxpayer and to the economy are taken into account. But I have given the House an assurance that we are looking in great detail at this report. There will be no undue delay, and we will come to our conclusions at the earliest possible moment.
I visited the old Rehal building in Amloch, which is being repurposed with business units and a new job centre for the north of the island. Would the Minister visit Amloch, meet some of my constituents and personally thank the team who worked so hard to find a suitable building?
Well, diolch yn fawr to the team in Ynys Môn. We have been searching for that building for a number of years to go to the added youth offer, and I'll be delighted to join her in Ynys Môn to thank the team.
Jim Shannon.
Mr Speaker, I'll get it right this time. What discussions has the Minister had with the Department for Communities back home at the Northern Ireland Assembly in relation to extreme poverty surges witnessed in the winters of 2022 and 2023? Thank you.
Well, as the honourable gentleman will know, the Northern Ireland administration is at liberty to make its own arrangements where it comes to most of the benefits for which the Department for Work and Pensions is responsible. However, they generally choose to go with the decisions that we make. But I can assure him that officials do work very closely with their counterparts in Northern Ireland to make sure that we take the needs of the Northern Irish people into account when we take those decisions.
That completes questions. Let the front bench.